Welcome to Equality Education, a show about inclusive teaching, supportive parenting, and a kinder future. Hello everyone, welcome back to the Equality Education podcast with me, Olly Pike. This week I have a fantastic guest for you who I was thrilled to speak with about so many interesting and not to mention topical issues. But before I get into all of that, let me say a big thank you to everyone who is supporting this podcast and my work with Pop and Olly by becoming Pop and Olly website members. I hope you have been enjoying the downloadable classroom resources, the exclusive chat room, and having a Pop and Olly book donated on your behalf to a UK primary school every month. Yep, some pretty cool perks there, which you can learn more about at popandolly.com/donate. Okay, let's get back to the main event. This week's guest is a British poet of Greek Cypriot and Caribbean descent, who was listed by the Independent newspaper as one of the 100 most influential LGBT+ people in the United Kingdom. They have written 2 books which both explore ideas of race, gender and sexuality, and last year they won the Stonewall Book Award in the Children's and Young Adults category for their second book, The Black Flamingo. Yes, this week on Equality Education, my guest is poet and author Dean Atta. Hello Dean, welcome to Equality Education. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm great, thanks for joining me today. As always, can you tell everybody your pronouns, please?
My pronouns are he and him.
Awesome. And can you tell everyone a happy memory from your childhood?
I think a happy memory from my childhood was getting a Barbie doll when I was a boy, and also getting an Action Man figure. And the Barbie doll was white and the Action Man was black. And so they resembled my mum and dad in my head.
Amazing.
So getting them to play together and, make house together was a kind of way of me acting out my parents, or how I wish they had been, because they didn't stay together, my parents. So the happiness was in the dolls.
Oh, that's so sweet. And that, actually, I really relate to that because I had Barbie dolls when I was younger. And that's something that you touch on in your book,
Yes.
The Black Flamingo, which is what I really want to talk about today. So first of all, let's just talk about how we met, which was a couple of weeks ago. We were on a panel together for Pride in Education, and our panel was about
published resources.
Yeah, what was it? I forgot already. Published resources for teachers and school children and young adults. And I think what was really interesting about it was it kind of looked at the idea of published resources being windows and mirrors, which I loved. I've never really heard that before. Had you heard that before?
Only on the rehearsal call we did a few days earlier.
Yeah, we did like a rehearsal,
which also took a whole hour. Like, our rehearsal for the hour panel was an hour conversation. Do you remember? So that was quite funny.
They should have recorded that as well.
It was really good.
Because there was so much good stuff. There's so much good stuff that we just dropped. Even before we started recording today, I was like, stop talking, because we need to save this for the podcast. But yeah, from that rehearsal call, I was like, oh, quickly order your book, Black Flamingo. And I read the whole thing cover to cover in a couple of days. And what I loved about it, well, it made me feel really smart, because it's like a spoken word poem type piece, isn't it? Book, which is really, really different. And so there's slightly less text on each page.
Yes.
So I just got through it so quick, and I felt like an absolute genius for finishing a book so quickly.
Well
So that's like one bonus, but that is not the most positive thing about the book. What I love about it's just so different and beautifully honest and raw, but equally it's like super fun and fabulous as well. And this is your second book. I'm talking about The Black Flamingo.
Yeah.
And firstly, what I want to ask about that book is, well, when I picked it up and started reading it, I was like, oh, this is like Dean's autobiography, and I didn't really look much into it. I just started reading it.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until I was halfway through the book and I was like, oh, hang on. I don't think this is an autobiography, because the main character in the book has a different name to you.
Yeah.
The main character is called Michael.
Yes.
And obviously you're called Dean.
Mm-hmm.
But then I'm like, well, no, there must be parts of Dean in this story. So can you just clear that up for me? I'm not sure if I'm being really silly.
No, you're not being silly. I think I felt comfortable writing about subject matter I knew about, and in the kind of character that I could most relate to. So I did choose a mixed race gay teenager growing up in London because I have been a mixed race gay teenager growing up in London. And so I could use some of my own experiences to inform the character, and also use research that I did working with young people in London schools, and also just kind of what I've seen, the change in things from when I was a teenager to teenagers today. You know, there's a lot more information, resources, and role models for them. So I wanted that to be reflected in the book as well. So it wasn't an autobiography, because if I'd written about my teens, that would have been during Section 28, when there wasn't the resources and the role models out there for kids to see, because there was a law that prohibited teachers in particular from talking about gay people in school. And so we didn't have access to that in my teens, but teenagers today do. So I wanted to kind of write about that and base it in the here and now, and not have it be kind of a historical fiction or a memoir or an autobiography, because I wasn't ready to write an autobiography anyway. I feel like, I don't know, I want to live a bit more before I write an autobiography. So I just, I used what I knew, and also who I am, to inform this character of Michael. And so, he does have similar background to me and some similar traits to me, but he got to do things I didn't do when I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. So I got to have a lot of fun with him. And I felt like it was like a fairy tale version of what I wish my childhood could have been like.
Yeah. I guess it's like a imaginary coming of age story then.
Yeah, I didn't come of age till I was 30, I think.
Oh, right. Yeah, really?
It took me a while to kind of, not the coming out part, but the kind of confidence part, and the feeling bold enough to do drag. I didn't do that until I was like 30 something. And so I think that is the kind of, and it's similar. A lot of people my age say they took a while to come out or have their first relationship, or to kind of come out to certain family members. You know, they might have been out to some people, but they might have kept it quiet from their family. And I think that's very common for people in their 30s, 40s and older. But I think anyone in their teens and 20s, I think it's slightly different. So there's that kind of generational difference going on as well. Which feels weird to think of myself as a whole different generation, but I am to the teenage readers. You know, I'm of a different generation to them. So that's why it's not an autobiography, because I'm kind of putting myself in their shoes and their high heels. And it's just it seems a lot more free and a lot more hopeful for young people today. Mm-hmm. I think it was really difficult for people my age and older.
Can I ask you what age you was when you came out, and how you felt before you came out? Kind of like, what was your journey to your realization?
I just wanted a boyfriend.
Oh.
And so I had a crush, and gosh, now you're going to see how close to my life the Black Flamingo is. I had a crush on a boy, and I asked him out with a letter, and it got round the school. And that was it. And I was out. And so it wasn't really a coming out as such. It was like an asking out of one person and them saying no, but then everyone else being like, oh, so you two, like, and the thing is, everyone thought we had gotten together, because they were like, oh, you asked him out, like, are you two together now? And I'm like, no, he said no. And then everyone at school was like, he said no, you got rejected. No one was like, oh, you're gay, that's bad. They were like, you got rejected. And that lasted a few days or a week, and that was it. Like, no one really commented on me being gay or liking a boy. They was just like, you got rejected. Like, and that was it. That was the only thing.
That is so interesting. And not that I want to mock the fact you got rejected, but like, that's weirdly positive.
Yeah.
What year was that?
That was, so I was, 15. So what are we, year 9, is that? Or
what date? So what, 2000
what year was I 15? God, I don't know. It's all a blur. I'm an old man now. No, I'm 35. Work backwards, please.
Oh gosh. Oh, that would have been a similar age to me then. So that would have been like maybe year 2000. Because that would not have happened at the school I was at. Like, no
What
way.
kind of school were you at? Like a comprehensive?
Yeah, school. And yeah, that was just not on the table to come out, because that would have been like the end of your school life where I was. So that's incredible to hear that, you know, across the country at relatively the same time. So you came out as gay, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. Like, I mean, I didn't come out. That's the thing. I just asked a boy out. And so then people are like, and then I think, let me think back properly. I think I then had a girlfriend afterwards, but like all we did was kiss, and like she was like, "Don't you want to do more?" And I was like, "No, I do not."
Oh, bless you.
And then I think I went to university as bisexual, and then I wasn't. Like I realized I knew I wasn't, and so then, you know, I think it wasn't until university I really came out as gay. Like I felt confident saying I was gay or saying anything about my sexuality. Like when I was younger, I didn't really like labels, so I didn't call myself black, like, but I didn't really even call myself mixed race. Like I didn't call myself anything to do with ethnicity at first, and I didn't want to label my sexuality as anything either. I think if I was a young person today, I might have said I was like pansexual or something, or I don't know. Like I just didn't like labels, and it's only later in life I've kind of understood their use, and understood kind of how they can be a shorthand to find community, and how to, you know, connect with other people, or to have people roughly understand you. They don't give someone a full understanding of who you are, but they give a rough understanding of who you are. And so, you know, though I'm mixed race, like I will say I'm black because it's more of a political statement for me. And then I am gay, and I am and, you know, I sometimes use queer as well, but that's not really about sexuality for me. That's about community. And I think there's a lot of people that identify as being queer with various sexualities and, you know, gender expressions and such. And so I find queer is an interesting umbrella term for many people within the LGBT community, and it's quicker than saying LGBT. So I just say queer.
Oh my gosh, it's such a difficult acronym. I prefer to use the word queer, and I feel like the word queer is more inclusive, because basically queer means anything but straight.
But there are some older people. But you can still join us
if you're a straight ally.
But there are some older people that don't like the word queer because, you know, that word was used to, you know, as hate speech against them, and you know, they were literally, you know, queer bashed. People would go out queer bashing, so they would go out to beat up anyone non-straight, and that was something that's probably scarred a lot of people and stayed with them. So the word queer has hugely negative connotations for them. So you have to kind of check when using queer if everyone you're talking about is comfortable with that phrase. Obviously, you can use it for yourself if you're comfortable, but when attaching it to other people, you just got to check if they're okay with it.
Yeah, I think it's about context. And actually, what's really interesting is the last couple of sentences you just said, we could apply that to the name of your first book.
Yes, we could. The title has the N word in it for anyone that's listening. Yeah.
Let's talk about that first book, because that is, you wrote poetry and spoken word before, because you've written loads of wonderful pieces. But that book is kind of like a collection of lots of different pieces of work.
Yeah. And
do you want to just talk about what the inspiration behind the book was?
Well, the book kind of came together after all the poems were written. So I started writing poetry seriously in, say, 2003. And by 2012, like, I'd written a particular poem called I Am Nobody's N-Word. And that poem was viral, like, online. So it went on YouTube, and it went kind of like got spread all over the place. And that was written in inspiration for it was like the conviction of two of the killers of Stephen Lawrence, but also reflecting on my relationship to the N-word, how I felt about it being used about me, how I felt about it being used in hip hop music, how I felt about it being used amongst my friends. And and I kind of like made my statement about how I felt about that word. And because of that particular poem, publishers approached me and asked if I had enough poems for a book. And because I'd been writing for about 9 or 10 years, I did. And so I kind of brought together all my kind of best poems that I had and found an order to put them in and got an editor to work over them. And then we put them out. And it was great to have a book out. It wasn't a conscious kind of decision at first. It was because the publisher approached me. It wasn't really something I was looking to do. I was very happy performing my poetry and putting stuff online and, writing for commission and doing poetry workshops in schools. And I was, just ticking along, having a great time, saying my piece wherever anyone would have me. And a book wasn't really part of the equation. And it was another poet called Benjamin Zephaniah who really encouraged me to go forward with the book idea, because he was like, people will take you so much more seriously if you publish a book. Like, that's just the fact of how things work in this country, and you could have loads of performances online. You could kind of make an album, but people won't see you as a real writer unless you have a book. And so I really took heed of that. And, Benjamin really kindly wrote a nice quote to go on the front of I'm Nobody's N-Word. And that was really nice to have his endorsement, because, he was one of the people that encouraged me to actually do it. And so, it was a really a collection of poetry about growing up in London, about being mixed race, about being gay, about falling in love and out of love, and being bitter and heartbroken. And there's a whole range of things in that book. It was really interesting because it starts off really political and then gets quite personal toward the end of the book. And that was just the journey of my writing, I guess, that I'd gone on, or the journey I thought that people definitely wanted those really hard-hitting political poems, and that's why they're right at the front of the book. But then I would kind of lured them into some stuff about family and some stuff about, relationships, and a poem about Grindr, and just kind of get in there with the stuff I also wanted to say, because I don't want to be restricted to just talking about one subject matter or kind of one type of poetry. I can be angry, I can be sad, I can be happy, I can be, confused. And I think that book reflects that. It's quite wide spanning in its kind of view. It looks at the world, it looks at specifically my own family, it looks at lots of different things. And so I wanted to, I'm glad that book is in the world. And I want to follow it up soon with another poetry collection. And initially, when I started working on what was the Black Flamingo before, it was going to be a collection of poems. And then we, my agent and editor, kind of had a conversation about what could be done with it. And actually, the idea of turning it into something narrative and fiction seemed really exciting. And I'd read a couple of verse novels that really inspired me, like The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. And that, the way it narrates with poetry, it's just really beautiful. And I was like, I could do that. Like, I've written plays, I've done lots of different types of writing. So the only thing I hadn't really tried to do besides film and TV is a novel. So I was like, let me do this. Let me try this. So and we did it.
When you go into schools with your first book, I'm really interested to know what the sort of reactions you get as well from teachers firstly, but then also from the pupils.
Well, some teachers just couldn't have that book in schools. And so that was a big reason of wanting to write The Black Flamingo and write it specifically for teenagers, was because a book called I'm Nobody's N-Word is quite confrontational, and it can be difficult for teachers to get senior leaders to sign off on that visit from a poet that wrote that book. But The Black Flamingo is a bit more, it's got a gentler kind of approach to talking about a lot of the same things. That's the funny thing, like the content of those two books are very similar.
Yeah.
In terms of talking about race and sexuality and relationships. But it one is kind of in a very confrontational manner, and the other is a bit more gentle and kind of lures you in. And then like there's certain pages where you're like, wow, this is quite hard hitting. I'm talking about the Black Flamingo now. There's certain pages where, you know, it's talking really directly about race, talking really directly about sexuality or sex. And, you know, that's quite interesting because YA is full of that. Like, books for teenagers have drugs, sex, alcohol, you know, all sorts of things, but they don't necessarily put that on the front cover. So, yeah, but there's obviously it's approved, you know, like teachers and librarians have voted for it for several awards. And, you know, it's not something that, you know, people have said it is suitable for teenagers. And I get lots of messages from teenagers that are loving it. But, you know, it's different to write with them in mind in particular. And that's everything, you know, from, you know, whether or not you use swearing to how, you know, you research into what it's like to be a teenager today. And also, you know, the cover, the title, all of that matters. So yeah, and the length and the readability. And like you've said, it's quite a page turner. And that is because of, you know, it's telling you a story and you want to know what happens next. With a poetry collection, like my first collection, each poem is its own thing. So you could read one and put it down and then, you know, come back to it whenever. But with a novel, you read one and it kind of leads you to the next one and the next one and the next one. So, you know, all the pages are kind of individual poems, but they're also pointing you to carry on reading and turn the page and see what happens next. So they don't fully conclude themselves. They kind of like leave you hanging a bit, which was really fun.
I've read one of your poems from your first book called Young, Black and Gay, and I love the way you've kind of intertwined the different identities into that poem. And I feel like that's what you've done, like you just said with Black Flamingo. It's like it's constantly looking at gender and identity and race, but it's all kind of like tied together. And there's some really, really lovely moments in there.
Thank you.
And for me, as a white person reading it, there was, you know, it was informative and educating as well. There's one moment which I took a little bit longer to read, and it was about when Michael was in the car with his uncle, and his uncle's like this character who's just like really friendly, like loves his nephew so much, like will do anything for him. He's kind of like his hero. And there's just a moment when they're in the car and they get pulled over by the police, and it's kind of like the only moment when you see his uncle a little bit crushed, I think, but then not totally crushed, because then he goes on to kind of speak to Michael about, well, I guess he's talking about white supremacy at that moment in the book.
Yeah. And I think that was something Michael couldn't have known at the age he was, you know. So as a teenager, he was quite protected, I think, in the story. You know, he doesn't necessarily come up against overt racism, and he has a privilege of being mixed race as well, you know, and so there's some privileges to that. But, you know, his uncle is a black man of Jamaican heritage, and they're stopped by the police, and the police make a lot of assumptions about his uncle, and his uncle lets Michael know that this isn't a one-off occurrence. This happens to him a lot, and he's sick of it, and he's tried his best to, you know, assimilate, to get education, to get a good job, to, you know, be an upstanding citizen, and still he's treated with suspicion, and so he just, you know, loses his temper a bit. And it's really interesting for Michael to see that, because he's never seen this side of his uncle, and it really opens his eyes. And that was really important for me, and people have commented on that quite a lot, that moment in the book, because Michael's learning something new at that point, and therefore, you know, the reader might also learn that along with Michael.
Yeah.
And then other people who have had that experience recognize it.
Definitely.
and feel seen by that moment in the book as well. And, you know, I've also published The Black Flamingo in America, and they say that interaction could have gone very differently with American police, you know, and we're hearing about all the police you know, brutality and murders by police officers, and so that is, I guess, you know, the difference is that our police, for the most part, don't pull out their guns first. They might taser you first, maybe, or just strangle you to death, which does happen still, So our police aren't faultless, but they're not killing Black people at the rate of American police. And so my book, reads differently to American readers because that is a even more deadly situation in their eyes. Mm-hmm. Whereas here, I think we still feel like I can't speak for all Black people, but you still feel like you could challenge the police if you feel like they're treating you unfairly here in the UK. But I think in America, young people, Black people are taught to like not talk back to the police because you could just get shot. Like not run, not make any sudden movements, not, let them disrespect you and deal with it afterwards if you get away. And that's really tragic to think that's how people are living their lives, and in fear, all the time. I think I deal with that moment with fairly light touch, because it doesn't go badly, but it could have, and there are stories. There are many people that still haven't got justice for dying in police custody. So, in the UK. So it's not something that I wanted to clumsily deal with, so I had to find the right moment for it to happen in the book. And it's a transitional moment for Michael. So his uncle's actually driving him to university, to where he's going to be, living. And, so it's a moment of like, he's receiving his education before he even gets to university. So that's kind of how I saw really it. So there's some things that school and university just can't teach you.
See, for me, that moment is the perfect example of what we were talking about earlier, but didn't finish talking about. A perfect example of windows and mirrors. And I feel like that moment will unite all different types of readers of different races. So for me, it was a window looking into someone else's world and seeing what's going on. And then for readers who may be Black or mixed race, then that's a mirror for them. Yeah. And the fact that moment is so relevant right now with everything that's going on in the world. When did you write Black Flamingo?
So 2017, 18,
Because that's 2 years ago. Yeah, that page could not be more relevant.
Yeah, and I think it's scary, like looking at what's going on and realizing that people could pull out books and poetry and writing by James Baldwin or people that were writing in the 60s and it still feel relevant to today. And that's the tragedy of things, that we haven't moved on so much as we had hoped we had, and for a lot of people, we haven't moved on at all. And the changes are happening for the wealthy, the middle class, the famous people, Black pop stars and athletes and stuff are doing great, and a Black president, some Black politicians are, there, but they'll tell you, Diane Abbott, Dawn Butler will tell you about the racism and misogyny that their offices receive, that they personally get tweeted at them. And so we haven't moved so far along. And I think something like Brexit showed us, there were many reasons people would have voted for or against Brexit, but it's unearthed some deeply disturbing, racism in our society as well. And it's also, when we look at injustices or inequalities around COVID-19 and who's dying and we're just not sure exactly why, but a lot of it looks like societal injustice and inequality in the kind of structures of our society. So whether it's institutional racism or other factors, and so it's hard to know even where to begin sometimes, and we're pointing out some of the problems, but us, I say, Black people are also asked to find the solutions. So like you'll hear someone like Angela Davis talk about abolition of prisons and taking down, prisons and dismantling and defunding the police. But people are like, but then what? Like, and you expect someone to have all the answers about what should happen, but so you don't get rid of the corrupt institutions because you can't think of what will replace them. That's really not good enough. And so it's just really difficult. We look at the statues being torn down, and we look at the calls for people to, diversify the curriculums, for example, and university and school curriculums, and get more Black history, get more LGBT history on the curriculum all year round. And people are like, think it's going to push out other people, and it's not. It's going to kind of enrich what we're going to be learning, and we're going to see things with a wider perspective and different points of view, and that can only help us understand each other better. But yeah, it's a lot to grapple with. It's too much for this podcast, and it's too much for me sometimes to even keep in my head to know what is it we're kind of fighting for, because it's literally everything. We're fighting for our lives. We're fighting for equality. We're fighting for, in America, it's tragic because, they don't have healthcare for all people. They don't have a kind of benefit system the way we do. And the inequalities are so much starker, I'd say. I could be wrong, but that's the way I see it. And I'm only kind of really having an eye on America more recently now that I've got a book out there, and I'm doing panels over there as well as here. And I feel a bit lost when kind of trying to talk about Black Lives Matter in a US context. But in a UK context, I think we are just polite about racism, and we've just embedded it into our institutions. And so people might not call you an N-word, but they'll still not give you a job if you have the wrong last name or the wrong color skin. And that does happen. And so I think we've got to really face up to the way we've got racism embedded in everything here. And just because people aren't overtly racist all the time, it doesn't mean that they don't have prejudice and bias against people of color. And so that's something we need to figure out. And we know that there's huge problems with transphobia in our society. And I think we've made such great strides for the L and the G and maybe the B, but I think for trans people we haven't. We're letting them down right now. And so I think it's not about just thinking about Black lives or trans lives. It's about being intersectional in your approach and thinking about all people, people with disabilities, people, women who are, not paid as well as men for the most part, thinking about where our society is letting people down and addressing that every time we see it, not just for the group that we belong to, because I think that's essentially what everyone does, and that's why the status quo is maintained, because we live in the UK and most people are white and most people are straight. And so everything's working fine for them. So we have to think beyond and outside of our own identities and think about other people, less fortunate, or people we can ally with or unite with to fight together.
I feel like we're in such an interesting time. And I don't know, I feel as much as it's sometimes hard to watch and read, I'm optimistic because it's exciting. It's exciting seeing them statues being torn down. And I know that can be problematic for some people, but honestly, for me, I was like, tear their statues down. I know other people will be like, well, do we have to tear every statue down? And, that's a whole other conversation. But just the fact that statues were taken down and they actually put up a statue, I don't know if you've seen, of a Black Lives Matter protester in its place.
Yeah.
And seeing that gave me goosebumps, and I was like, this is our new history. We are recreating the world, and I feel like little light bulbs keep going off in everyone's minds. And like you said, we're slowly stepping outside of our identity bubbles and connecting with other identity bubbles, and everything is becoming intersectional. And that's what your book does so well.
Thank you.
And that's why I think Black Flamingo will be such a useful resource for teachers in secondary school, to teach about different identity aspects.
I hope so.
Oh, let's talk about drag. That's what we haven't spoken about. So you have experience of being a drag queen, much like the character Michael in Black Flamingo.
Yes, but I came to it much later than Michael did. So I did drag in my 30s, and he does drag at 19 at university, and he slays it. And I kind of channeled some of my own nervousness and, messing up my eyelashes and kind of learning that eyebrows are sisters, not twins, and learning to walk in heels and feeling that power when you step on stage and everyone's looking at you and admiring you and eating out the palm of your hands. And if you want to tell them to just clap for you for no reason, they will. Like, there's certain little flourishes and things you can do to just make people whoop and holler. And you just feel so powerful when you're on stage in drag. It's just an incredible feeling. Obviously, I've only done drag in contexts where I was wanted and welcome. And I think that's, so I've never taken drag to anywhere where they weren't expecting me, if you know what I mean. And so, I think about, when I'm in drag, I kind of feel super empowered, but it's not necessarily how I want to dress every day. It's not an expression of my own gender. It's just a kind of playfulness that I get to, try out and, feel this character. And I think it kind of connects for me back to, acting as a kid and doing plays and musical theatre and stuff like that. But there's something else, because there is a version of you in your drag persona. Even if you come up with something so wildly different to yourself, it's still you that has to put that costume on. And you're there underneath, kind of channeling that energy or that character. But I think drag is something everyone should try. I think everyone should give it a go. I'd say everyone should try write a poem as well. But I just think there's something of you that doesn't come out in your everyday that gets to express itself in drag. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. And the venues where it happens are usually really supportive, friendly, amazing places where, everything goes, as long as it's, respectful. And so that's what I love about drag.
I think you just really well described the difference between our gender identity and drag. Because obviously our gender identity is, which gender we feel we are. But drag is like playtime.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But, there's sometimes where I felt sad about, for example, I've done drag and, got dressed at the venue. And then to go home, I've had to really reckon with, I'm quite comfortable wearing this just to get home, but am I safe?
Yeah.
And knowing that I wouldn't necessarily be safe to travel home unless I took a taxi really breaks my heart for the people that I know that express their gender through, makeup and clothes that aren't the mainstream way of presenting yourself. And that's really heartbreaking, when I think of my friends that just genuinely don't feel safe, but that is who they are. Like, that's how they want to be in the world, and the world isn't ready for them. And that's just really sad and heartbreaking that it's still so dangerous to present in a way that people aren't expecting or people aren't used to seeing. So it's pretty it's pretty hard out there, and that's why I kind of love the queer spaces, the safe spaces that we create for ourselves, where those, whether you're doing drag or whether you are a trans non-binary person that wants to that only feels safe in these venues to truly express who they are. Because often people come to venues and get dressed there, get dressed and do their makeup in the toilets of the venue and take it off before going home, or take a taxi home, because the public transport or the streets themselves are not safe. And that's criminal, really. That should be the case, that people don't feel safe, because obviously it is criminal if someone attacks you because of how you're dressed or what makeup you have on. They are breaking the law. But do you feel safe to even contact the police if that happens, or do you know if you'll get out of that situation without serious injury? So do you want to risk it? And that's what really breaks my heart.
Yeah, me too.
And so sometimes as a cis person, I want to go out in makeup just to normalize it or usualize it for people. But I know I don't feel safe either. And that's really hard. I'm That's why we need pride marches. That's when we're all there. We take over the streets, and I think that's when the real importance of those times of community out in the open, in the daylight, is really important, because there's so many people that can't do that on an everyday basis, but on a pride march, they can dress up the way they really want to, or the way they just feel like that day. But it's just like the safety in numbers is the amazing thing. And, the defiance of societal norms, and, the kind of just embracing of our uniqueness and our beauty, is just fantastic on a pride parade or march. I've missed not having prides this year. I've done a few online prides, of course, but it's not quite the same as being there on the streets.
Everything you just said is something that I really relate to. Like, pride is so important for me, because it's like, it's one of the few days where you really get to express yourself through your clothing and through your decorations and through your art. And as much as I love pride, that it feels safe when you're there, even that journey to pride, I've myself had to sometimes second guess what my journey is going to be like, and be like, oh, do I really want to wear this crop top because I've got to travel on the train, and is it going to be safe? And there's been lots of times in my life when I've removed accessories or items of clothing because I don't want to give away my queerness. And I guess for some people, drag will be that time where they can kind of make up for what they've lost. And I think for me, it's like, that's why I started my YouTube channel, because it's like, I can be anyone on my YouTube channel. It's safe. I can wear cat ears if I want. I can wear a pink jumper.
How do you deal with negative comments on YouTube if you get them?
Oh, I generally donate a book on their behalf, and then I let them know. and then they stay pretty quiet after that.
Amazing.
I sometimes even write the troll's name on the donation slip, which is probably illegal, but it's quite cathartic for me. So so I guess it's interesting, because even though I said drag is playtime, I guess for some people drag isn't just playtime.
But also drag is like big business for some people. Like, there's people making a really good living from drag, not just RuPaul, not just people from Drag Race, but people, who have made a career as a drag performer. And I just think it's something that I'd never thought about, and really something that I mostly did as research for the book. But it's something I admire so much more now that I've written about it and tried it for myself, because it's a tough job. It takes a lot of work, and, to have a variety of acts as well. Like, it's one thing to be a, one trick pony, but to have a variety of acts and costumes, whether you buy them or make them, that's hard work or a lot of money. In terms of like making outfits or buying outfits, and just keeping it fresh for yourself and doing those hours. It's like late night work, and then, it's just so much to it. Like, I think drag performers are amazing, like, and they make the world so much more joyful. And so I just think they should be like our rulers. Like, my next book might be like about a world ruled by drag queens and kings.
My friend, Callum McSwiggan, I don't know if you know him, but he's just written a book, and he wrote something really clever in it about drag queens. He said that they're the hostesses of our community, which I really love, because it's like when you go to like a new bar, if there's a drag queen in there, you're like, oh, okay, cool. They're gonna know what's going on. They're in charge here. So even though they can be quite intimidating, I feel like there's that element of safety with them as well.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I kind of got into the London scene, like big time, like, and I was going to Circus, which was run by Jodie Harsh. And she is incredible, massive hair, like amazing DJ, amazing life and soul of the party, brings together all the most fabulous people in amazing clubs. And then I met her a few times as Jodie, and then I met her as her boy self, and like so shy, so unassuming. And I was just like, wow, the transformation from like the boy to the drag queen was just huge. And I was just like, that's so interesting, because I think the reason I'm okay not doing drag a lot is because I'm actually quite confident as me. Like, I've actually had to build up a lot of resilience as me because I've been out as me for a long time. Like, I've been performing for a long time, and I never had anything. I used my real name from the beginning. Like, a lot of poets I know have like a poet stage name, like, and they have like almost a persona or a character as a performer of poetry. But I was just like, this is me. Like, this is me learning to just say what I mean, and you know, people can take it or leave it, but I'm going to be myself. And so I kind of really like who I am. And so, like, when I do drag, it's something else, and it's super fun, but I almost see it as like Dean Atta as the Black Flamingo rather than fully becoming someone else called the Black Flamingo, if that makes sense.
I think sometimes for some people, these personas are like armor. And I know that's something that I kind of used to do, because my background is in acting as well. And I think on my YouTube channel, on the Pop on a YouTube channel, the Olly on there is a character, and it's not necessarily me, even though it's got elements of me in it. And I think that was a way of kind of keeping the real me safe. But as I've kind of got older and discovered the real me a bit more, I'm happier to share that version.
Yeah.
And like you, I quite like the real version of me, and I feel like that's kind of what I try and share on this podcast. As much as I love Olly from Pop and Olly. But yeah, I guess that's my experience.
Cool.
Okay, final topic. I briefly just want to get your views on something that's been quite current recently, in terms of maybe a few authors that are getting cancelled. And I'm sure you know who they are. You know, we've got...
Can I just say, though, I do not believe cancelling is a real
this is
thing.
what I want to talk about. Like, is cancel culture real?
Go on then. Ask your full question,
no, I just
then.
want your views on like what you think about the whole situation with J.K. Rowling. With, you know, David Walliams was accused of having racist elements in his books, and then we briefly even spoke about, you know, an author which I like, Roald Dahl, and how he's been accused of being anti-Semitic, and it's. As authors, I think it's kind of scary to think your art you might get cancelled if that is a real thing.
Yeah. Well, I think what we should do is, if Jewish people are saying something is anti-Semitic, listen to them. And if Black people are saying something is racist, listen to them. And if trans people are saying this is transphobic, listen to them. And don't dismiss them just because someone you admire, you don't want to see any fault in them, because, you know, we all have faults, and we all fall short, and we all are ignorant sometimes. And it's about, is that person willing to listen and learn, or are they being ignorant and stubborn with that ignorance, you know? So I just think these celebrities or authors or whoever it might be, when they get called out, like, do they listen? Does their apology reflect their listening and their understanding of what this community has said to them? Or are they doubling down on ignorance, you know? And I think that's what we need to look for. And I think some people do apologize really well. Like Halle Berry recently turned down a role to play a trans man. And I think her apology seemed genuine, and it seemed to show she's learning and, you know, trying to find out more about the trans community, but definitely not taking this role anymore. And, you know, didn't mean to offend anyone. And, you know, some people would still say her apology wasn't good enough, like, or that she should have never considered the role. It shouldn't have been made public. But I don't think celebrities are always in charge of everything that gets made public. However, when they tweet and blog personally hateful things, then I think they should be held accountable for that. And what that looks like is different, you know, for different people. So I don't know what should happen with David Walliams' book, and I haven't read whichever books are being accused of being problematic, but I know for a fact, you know, I grew up finding Little Britain funny. When I look back at it now, it's horrendous. Like, it's classist, it's fat shaming, it's racist. Like, it's misogynistic. There's so many things wrong with Little Britain that when I was younger and didn't know better. I thought it was funny. And now I am older and know better. I know it's not. But the thing about David Williams, is he was a big man making that show and he should have known better. And I imagine with the books, he probably does know better. So I don't really know. We have to give people the benefit of the doubt, especially if, they come out and apologize and, and it seems genuine and they then do something to make amends. That doesn't have to necessarily be giving money or whatever, but something to make amends. What do you do to show that you're sorry? Words are easy, says the writer, but how are your future actions going to show? How are you going to make make connections with the communities that you've offended? So this is what I ask of people. It's just to listen and don't dismiss people as trying to ruin your livelihood, because at the end of the day, this kind of hateful language, this kind of hateful rhetoric, it actually causes people to commit suicide. It actually causes a society to be ongoing prejudice in society, because if a popular person says it, it must be okay. And that's what we need to really reckon with, that if you're an author that's selling millions of books or has millions of followers, you have a responsibility what you say, not just in your books, what you tweet, what you blog, what you say in interviews as well.
Dean.
Yes.
Where can people find you? Sorry. Where can people find you online?
I guess they can start with my website, which is deanatta.com. So DEANATTA.com. And then Dean Atta on all the social media. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I've got a page as well. YouTube, I have a channel, but I'm not like you. I'm not amazing on YouTube, but I've got some stuff on there, some videos of me doing poems.
You've got some great stuff. You've got some of your performances, which are stunning.
Yeah, but for a long time, a lot of my performances went on other people's channels because I just wasn't fussed about YouTube. But then it's nice to actually have a centralized place for your own videos. So I do try and put some up there when I can be bothered. But at the moment,
there's so much to keep on top of, isn't there?
Yeah, and I'm working on my next book now, so I'm not going to be as active on social media for the coming months. But I'll be lurking in the background, and every now and again I'll pop out and say hello.
You keep your head down, and write another masterpiece.
I shall.
Dean, final thing. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Wow. Be Prime Minister, because anyone can.
I'd vote for you.
Yay. When I was younger, I genuinely had aspirations to be a Prime Minister. And as I kind of got orbiting around politics and met some political figures, I got quite disillusioned by it. But I actually think that could have been a reason to get more into it and shake things up a bit. But I found I went on a path of less resistance, which was the arts. And I think the arts is such a welcoming and inclusive space for the most part. And so I think, I've gone into a career that kind of has given me, so much back, and I think politics seems quite a thankless job, and pretty hard. But I think I'm made of the stuff to be able to do it. But there's still time, right? So I might be more advice to my older self is be Prime Minister.
I love it. Amazing. Thanks, Dean. It's been an honor having you on today.
Thank you, Olly.
I can't wait for the next book.
Woo.
Hello again, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed this episode of Equality Education. Thank you so much for listening. If you did like it, then please consider helping me to make more episodes by becoming a Pop and Olly site member at popandolly.com. You can do this for as little as £2 a month, and you will receive some really awesome perks too. So please go and check it out. Okay, thanks again for being here, and I can't wait to have another episode for you next time. Take care.